Leon sat up abruptly in bed. Cold sweat soaked his silk pajamas. His heart pounded wildly in his chest, and his breathing was as short as if he had just run 3 kilometers. He looked blankly around him. The familiar room, the familiar furnishings, even the bedside lamp he had forgotten to turn off was still on. Everything looked normal. I didn't die? His voice was hoarse, like sandpaper rubbing against wood. The memories from the second before were still seared in his mind. At Iris's funeral, before the pale gray tombstone, he knelt there repeating apologies over and over, his knees aching from the hard ground. When Joel was arrested, he looked back with a hideous grin. Leon, you owe her, and you can never repay it in this lifetime. Then came the blinding headlights, the screaming tires, the deafening screech of twisting metal. In the instant of the crash, his only thought was, finally, I can see you. But now, Leon looked down at his own hands. Clean, slender, without the scars left by the car accident. Trembling, he reached for the phone on the nightstand, unlocked it with his fingerprint, and the screen lit up. June 15, 2023, Thursday, 7:23. His fingers froze. He threw off the quilt and rushed to the mirror. The man in the mirror was 24 years old, with a sharp jawline, no dark circles under his eyes from exhaustion, and hair sticking up messily from sweat. The engagement ceremony had been held 3 months ago, and there was exactly 1 month left until the wedding. Iris was alive, living at her parents' house, and painting in the garden every morning at 8 o'clock. There's still time. Leon gripped his phone, his knuckles turning white. He closed his eyes, and the scenes from his past life pierced him like shards of glass. Wearing a white dress, Iris stood timidly before him, her eyelashes trembling violently, and whispered, "Please take care of me, Mr. Leon." He had just finished playing basketball with Joel that day and was in a bad mood. With a cold face, he didn't even look at her, just let out a grunt and walked away. After they were married, she waited until 10 every night. He was either at a bar or at the office, and when she called, he would hang up immediately. Once, she mustered the courage to ask him, "Will you be back for dinner tonight?" He replied impatiently, "Are you annoying or what?" Joel occasionally came to the house and, right in front of Iris, mocked her. "What on earth is this supposed to be?" And he laughed along. Joel said that Iris hid in her room every day doing who knows what, and he believed him. Joel fabricated evidence of her interacting with outsiders. And without asking a single question, he smashed his teacup until Iris died in an accidental car crash. It wasn't until he dug up all the evidence that he discovered Joel had been plotting since before the wedding. "I'm such a fucking bastard." Leon raised his hand and slapped himself hard across the face. His cheek began to sting, but what was this pain compared to what Iris had endured? He remembered the report the doctor had given him during the investigation: high-functioning autism, extreme sensitivity to noise, social interaction difficulties, difficulty recognizing emotions. She was afraid of crowds, of being looked at, of sudden touches. He was the only person in the world she could rely on, yet what did he give her? Cold violence, neglect, impatience, and the knife Joel had stabbed her with through his hand. "Iris!" Leon murmured the name, his eyes burning. He haphazardly threw on a shirt, grabbed the car keys, and rushed out. The butler was polishing a vase in the corridor and was so startled by his appearance that he nearly dropped his cleaning cloth. "Sir, where are you going? Breakfast isn't ready yet." The Sioux residence. Leon didn't look back. His step so fast it was as if he were off to fight a fire. The butler stood frozen in place. Since the engagement, Mr. Leon had never voluntarily gone to the Sioux residence. Every time someone came from the Sioux family, he would make sure to slip away beforehand. Today, what was going on? Leon parked his car at the entrance of the Sioux villa, only then realizing he hadn't made any preparations at all. His palms were sweating, the second button of his shirt was done up wrong, and his hair was a mess. He sat in the car for a moment to catch his breath, looking at the wrought iron gate of the Sioux residence, suddenly unsure how to go inside. He had been here a few times before, but every time was just going through the motions. exchange a few pleasantries upon entering, then find an excuse to leave. He had never seriously looked at this place, nor had he ever seriously looked at Iris. "Sir." The guard recognized his car and trotted over, unable to conceal his surprise. "Why are you here so early? Is Iris awake?" Leon's throat felt tight. The guard was even more surprised. Was Mr. Gu asking about the missus? "The missus is painting in the garden. She's there at this time every day," the guard hurriedly said. "I'll take you." "No need, I'll go myself." Leon pushed the car door open, walking very slowly. As he crossed the front yard, he saw that old scholar tree. An easel was set up beneath it, and a figure in a light blue dress sat on a small folding stool. Her long hair loosely tucked behind her ears, curled up into a small ball. Sunlight filtered through the leaves onto her shoulders. She held her brush with great focus, occasionally pausing to stare blankly into space. Leon suddenly didn't dare move forward. In his past life, Iris was nervous every time she saw him. Shoulders hunched, eyes cast down, speaking like a mosquito buzzing. She could sense that he didn't like her, so she shrank further away, and the tighter she withdrew, the more annoyed he became, a vicious cycle. He took a deep breath and walked over with light steps. "Iris." His voice was kept low, as if afraid of startling a bird. Iris's pen paused. She didn't look back, but Leon saw her right shoulder tremble almost imperceptibly. She was afraid. This realization caused a dull ache in Leon's chest. He stopped 3 steps away, not coming any closer. Iris slowly turned her head. Her eyes were very clear, with the outer corners slightly drooping, so when she looked at people, it always seemed as if she were hiding from something. When her gaze met Leon's face, she was clearly stunned. She probably hadn't expected him to come at this hour. Mr. Leon." Her voice was soft and trembling at the end. Leon felt a bitterness in his throat. She called him Mr. Leon. Even after 3 months of being engaged, she still did so because she didn't dare get close to him, because she felt he didn't belong to her. "Just call me Leon." He crouched down to look her in the eyes. "We're already engaged." Iris's eyelashes trembled as she lowered her eyes. "I know. What are you drawing?" Leon didn't dare move any closer. He simply crouched where he was and tilted his head to look at the drawing board. Iris instinctively pulled the board closer to her chest, her fingers tightening around the pencil. After several seconds, she slowly turned the board around just a little. On the paper was a very large tree, with a small figure sitting underneath. The outline was rough, but it was clearly a girl, shoulders hunched, face turned toward the distance. The distance was painted with large patches of yellow, like a field of sunflowers. Leon's throat felt tight. She had drawn herself, sitting under the tree, looking into the distance, all alone. "It's very good." His voice was so soft, as if he were afraid of breaking something. "Iris, you draw so well." Iris looked up and glanced at him quickly. She was rarely praised, and for a moment, she didn't know how to react. The corners of her mouth twitched, then she pressed her lips together. "Can I come watch you paint every day?" Leon held his breath after asking. Iris stared at him blankly, as if trying to discern whether there was a trap in his words. After a long while, she gave the slightest nod. When Leon stood up, his legs were a bit numb. As he walked to the garden gate, he couldn't help but look back. Iris was still sitting under the tree, but this time she wasn't painting. She was looking in his direction, confused and cautious, like a snail finally poking half its head out. Leon clenched his fists, turned around, and strode away. Sitting in the car, he dialed a number. "Look up Joel for me. Everything." A voice on the other end sounded puzzled. "Sir, isn't Mr. Joel your? From today on, he is my greatest enemy." After hanging up the phone, Leon rested his forehead against the steering wheel. His cheek still hurt, but for the first time he felt a sense of peace in his heart. He needed to take it slow, he couldn't rush. Earning back Iris's trust wouldn't happen in a day. He had a lifetime. When he returned home, the butler greeted him, holding a breakfast tray that had already gone cold. Leon took it and wolfed it down in a few bites, then went upstairs to wash his face and change into a crisp shirt. As he came downstairs, he said to the butler, "Buy me all the books on the market about autism." The butler was stunned. "Sir, you want to learn?" The books arrived in the afternoon, stacked on the desk nearly half a person high. Leon pulled out a copy of How to Interact with People on the Autism Spectrum from the top of the pile. As soon as he opened the first page, he saw a line in bold text. "Do not force eye contact. Do not make sudden physical contact. Do not use loud or rapid speech." He recalled what he had done to Iris in his past life, frowning and glaring at her, complaining that she spoke too slowly, and sometimes slapping the table out of impatience. He hadn't managed to follow a single "do not." Leon sat at his desk and began to read page by page. When he reached the section on sensory overload, he stopped and marked a line with his pen. Patients may be hypersensitive to specific sounds, lights, textures, or smells, and may experience physical pain in noisy environments. He remembered how Iris would turn pale at every family dinner, how she never touched certain fabrics, and how she would quietly inch backward whenever she caught a whiff of strong perfume. He used to think all of this was just being difficult. "Steward." He looked up and called out, "Sir, find out what Iris likes to eat, what she dislikes, what fabric she finds comfortable to wear, and what scents she hates. The more detailed, the better." The steward opened his mouth, swallowed his doubts, nodded, and went to do it. Leon read for 3 days straight, filling half a notebook with notes. On the morning of the third day, when he went to the Sioux house again, he was holding a craft paper bag. Iris was painting under the locust tree as usual. Hearing footsteps, she looked up. Seeing it was him, she paused for a moment, then lowered her head to continue painting. But her shoulders weren't trembling like last time. Leon sat down 3 steps away from her, took a thermos out of the paper bag, and placed it on the ground between them. "It's warm," he said. "Milk, no sugar." Iris's pen paused for a moment. "You said last time you don't like things that are too sweet." Leon said nothing more after that, sitting quietly to the side. He remembered what the book said. Don't force interaction, don't create pressure to converse, and letting the other person get used to your presence is more important than actively trying to talk. Iris drew for 10 minutes and glanced at the thermos 3 times. The 4th time, she put down her pen, hesitated for a moment, then reached over and pulled the cup closer. She unscrewed the lid and steam rose from it. It was the scent of warm milk. She lowered her head and took a small sip, then quickly glanced at Leon. Leon said nothing, simply averting his gaze and pretending to look at the clouds in the distance. Iris took 2 more sips from her cup, the corners of her mouth curving slightly. As she set the cup down, she casually turned the drawing board a little toward Leon. Today she was painting a field of sunflowers, the yellow petals spread out one by one, dazzlingly bright. Leon glanced at it but didn't offer any praise. He just smiled. 2 days later, when Leon arrived, Iris was already painting. Seeing him sit down, she painted for a while before suddenly speaking, "Do you like flowers?" The sound was a bit clearer than last time. Leon's heart skipped a beat. "I like sunflowers." Iris paused, her pen tip hovering, then looked up at him. She seemed surprised, her lips moving slightly. "Me too." That was the first time she had voluntarily told him something. Leon chewed on these 3 words in his mind all day long. On the afternoon of the 7th day, Leon brought a small box with him. Iris looked up halfway through her painting, her gaze landing on the box. She didn't speak, but her fingers gripping the brush tightened slightly. "I have something for you." Leon placed the box beside the easel, then stepped back and sat down. "Open it after you finish painting." Iris looked at the box for a long while, then lowered her head to continue painting. After another 20 minutes, she put down her brush and slowly picked up the box to open it. Inside lay a silver chain with a pendant shaped like a sunflower made of gold leaf. The petals were so thin they were translucent, glistening brightly in the sunlight. Iris froze. "I had it custom made," Leon said. "Your initials are engraved inside the flower center." They're very small. You have to look closely to see them. Iris held the necklace in her palm and looked at it for a long time, then raised her head, her eyes lighting up, once and then again. Thank you. 2 words, light as the wind brushing past leaves. But Leon detected a different temperature within them. No longer fear and evasion, but a tentative, awkward softness. Do you want me to help you put it on? Iris was silent for a few seconds, then nodded. Leon stood up and walked over behind her. He kept his touch as light as possible, his fingertips barely grazing the fine hairs at the nape of her neck. When the clasp clicked shut, he heard Iris draw a sharp, short breath, then slowly let it out. All right. He stepped back. Iris lowered her head to look at the sunflower on her collarbone, reaching out to gently touch the petals. Leon didn't speak again. Sunlight filtered through the gaps in the locust tree leaves, scattering across the ground like fragments of gold. Iris picked up her paintbrush again, adding a small sunflower to the canvas, nestled right against the large tree. After that, Leon came every day, arriving earlier and earlier. He began to remember Iris's habits, drinking half a cup of warm water at 10 o'clock, squinting when the afternoon sun was too harsh, arranging the paint tubes on the palette in color order, and frowning if they were disturbed. He learned to put the blown about paint tubes back in place before she frowned, learned to move the parasol an inch closer when she rubbed her eyes, and learned to take his time standing up to speak, so as not to create a sense of oppression. Iris would start by pouring 2 cups of water herself at 9:40. When Leon arrived and saw the 2 cups placed side by side under the shade of the tree, he almost lost his composure. On the 16th day, a line of small text appeared on Iris's drawing board, tucked away in the corner of the sunflower field. Very happy today. Leon saw it but said nothing. However, after returning home, he smiled at himself in the mirror for a long time. On the 17th day, Joel called. Leon, are you free tonight? Let's meet up at the old place. It's been a long time. Leon looked at the name on the screen, his stomach churning. In his past life, it was this voice, sitting across from him with a smile while pouring wine, saying, "Has Iris been cooped up at home again?" while filling his glass to the brim. Sure. 8 o'clock. He hung up the phone and stood in the study for a while. Inside a locked drawer lay a freshly compiled dossier, several abnormal fund flows handled by Joel over the past 6 months, registration records for 3 shell companies, and screenshots of his frequent calls with someone named Simon. These were things he had uncovered during the final months of his past life. But unfortunately, Iris was already gone by then. In this life, he only needed to piece together the fragments from his memory. But that wasn't enough. Who was behind Joel? Leon had never managed to get to the bottom of it in his past life, right up until his death. 8 o'clock in the evening. Inside a private room at a high-end club, Joel sat in his usual spot. He smiled when he saw Leon enter. You look well. What have you been busy with lately? Family matters. Leon sat down, his tone flat. Joel poured a glass of wine and slid it over, his gaze sweeping casually across Leon's face. I heard you've been going to the Sioux house a lot lately? What's this? Suddenly interested in that autistic fiancée of yours. She is my fiancée. Leon picked up the wine glass, didn't drink, and twirled it between his fingers. I'm going to see her. Is there a problem? Joel's smile froze for half a second, then quickly warmed up again. No problem, no problem. I was just curious. Didn't you used to find her the most annoying? Saying she couldn't even speak properly. I was busy before. Leon interrupted him and looked up. Under the lights, he saw it clearly, the tightening of the muscles at the corner of Joel's mouth for an instant. He was nervous. By the way, Leon set down his glass. Have you been in touch with several investment firms lately? Joel froze for a moment. Who told you that? I heard you're planning a big project. Leon smiled. A faint, measured smile. Good luck. Joel stared at him for 2 seconds, then smiled too. Thanks, man. Leaving the club, Leon got into the car, the smile vanishing completely from his face. He dialed the butler's number. Keep an eye on those investment firms. Find out where the funding is coming from. Yes. Hanging up the phone, Leon closed his eyes. Tonight's probe had two meanings. First, to tell Joel, I'm watching you, and second, to force the other side to accelerate their actions. People only make mistakes when they get desperate. He would settle the scores from his past life one by one. But before that, he glanced at the time on his phone. 9:40. Iris should have returned to her room by now. Iris woke up at 4 in the morning on her wedding day. When the nanny came in to help her put on her wedding dress, she was as stiff as a board. The white veil was heavy, and the headpiece was studded with tiny diamonds. When the makeup artist leaned in to draw her eyebrows, she nearly sprang from her chair. Someone was standing too close. "Miss, bear with it," the nanny coaxed softly. "Today is a big day." Iris closed her eyes, her eyelashes trembling like butterfly wings. She heard footsteps in the hallway outside, the muffled sounds of things being moved in the next room, and the hum of guests arriving downstairs. Every sound drilled into her mind. She gripped the armrests, her knuckles turning white. The door opened. Leon walked in. The makeup artist and the nanny exchanged a glance and tactfully withdrew. Leon was wearing a black suit today, his hair neatly slicked back. Yet the moment Iris looked up, she saw a small crease on his cuff that hadn't been ironed smooth. He probably hadn't slept well either. Scared, he squatted down in front of her. Iris nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. She could hear the noise outside. There were many people, it was very loud, and there was the kind she feared most. The sound of people sizing her up, discussing and pointing fingers. She could imagine how those people looked at her. The Gu family had married an abnormal wife. Leon took her hand. He did so slowly, first his fingers, then his palm, giving her enough time to pull away. Iris didn't move. "During the ceremony, look only at me," Leon said. "From the moment you enter the hall until you finish your vows, you look only at me. No one else matters." Iris looked into his eyes. There was something in them that put her at ease. She slowly exhaled. Okay. More than 200 people were seated in the auditorium. As Iris walked down the red carpet on her father's arm, those gazes pricked at her like little needles. She heard people whispering in the third row on the right. Their voices lowered, but the three words autism drilled into her ears loud and clear. Her steps faltered for a moment. Then she saw Leon. He stood at the far end of the platform watching her. With so many guests, so many flowers, and so many lights around him, his gaze rested in only one direction. He looked at her, his lips moving as he silently mouthed two words. Iris understood. "Look at me." She took a deep breath, withdrew her gaze from her surroundings, and looked only at Leon. Step by step, the hem of her dress trailing over the red carpet, she walked up to him. Leon extended his hand, and she placed hers in his. The officiant's voice came from a distance. "Mr. Leon, do you take Miss Iris to be your wife, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health?" "I do." Leon's voice was steady, steadier than anyone had imagined. Iris's fingers were still trembling as they exchanged rings. Leon cupped her hand and slid the ring on, his touch as gentle as tying a string to a flower. Then he picked up the other ring, placed it in Iris's palm, and held her hand, guiding her to slip it onto his own ring finger. "Please, the groom may kiss the bride." Iris's breath grew short again. Leon lowered his head, stopping an inch from her lips, then tilted slightly, letting the kiss land on her forehead. It was light and slow, as if saying, "No rush." The audience fell silent. Then someone began to applaud, and the applause gradually swelled into a chorus. Iris stood before Leon, the warmth of his lips lingering on her forehead, and suddenly felt that all those gazes weren't so piercing after all. Once the banquet began, Leon never left Iris's side. When someone came to offer a toast, he blocked them. "Iris can't drink." When someone approached to make small talk, he gave a curt and guided Iris a step to the side. Iris clutched the hem of his suit, staying close to him, with half her face hidden behind his back. Later, Someone walked over with a wine glass, pausing their gaze on Iris's face. "Is Mrs. Gu doing well? I heard she wasn't feeling well." The tail end of "wasn't feeling well" curled upward, and everyone present caught the implication. Iris's shoulders hunched slightly. Leon set his glass down on the table, his voice low but cold. "She is fine. If there is nothing else, please excuse us." He took Iris's hand and turned to leave. When they reached the door, Iris tugged at his sleeve. Leon turned back to see her tilting her face up slightly, her lips parting for a moment. "Are we going home now?" she asked softly, her voice holding a trace of fear, but also a hint of anticipation, expressed almost proactively for the first time. "Let's go home." Leon tightened his grip on her hand. On the first night, Iris thought they would be sleeping in separate rooms. She had asked the nanny to prepare the guest room in advance. But Leon walked in, sat on the edge of the bed, keeping a distance of one person's width between them. "I'll sleep here. If you feel uncomfortable, just let me know any time." Iris lay on the other side of the large bed, staring at the ceiling. She could hear Leon's breathing, steady and slow. It was different from every time before. Previously, when she lay alone, she was always afraid of the dark, of sudden noises, of the sound of tree branches scraping against the window. Now, with someone beside her breathing evenly, she suddenly wasn't so afraid anymore. In the middle of the night, she turned over. Leon woke up, and in his half-asleep state, he reached out to tuck in the corner of the quilt she had kicked away, then withdrew his hand without touching her. Iris lay in the dark, eyes open, watching him for a long time. When Iris woke the next morning, Leon was already up. A tray sat on the nightstand, warm milk, plain rice porridge, and a dish of sliced fruit. A note was tucked beneath the porridge bowl. "I've gone to the company for a meeting. I'll be back at noon." Iris picked up the note and read it twice, then folded it and put it in her pocket. As she went downstairs, the nanny came to meet her. "Madam, the master gave instructions. You may do whatever you wish today." Iris thought for a moment, then walked out into the garden. A new easel stood ready beneath the old scholar tree, with tubes of paint arranged neatly in color order, and a parasol had been added to one side. She sat for a while, then noticed a small booklet tucked in the bottom compartment of the easel. She picked it up and opened it. Inside were sketch copies of every painting she had done before, drawn by Leon himself. The lines were stiff, and the sunflowers looked like suns with crooked faces. Iris curled the corners of her lips, put the booklet back, and began to draw. The morning sun was warm. The following half-month was the quietest time in Leon's life. He worked from home every morning and spent the afternoons with Iris. In the shade of the garden trees, they each did their own thing. He read documents, she drew. Occasionally, when Iris got tired of drawing, she would put down her pen and zone out for a while. Occasionally, he would look up and find her watching him, their eyes meeting for a moment before she quickly looked away. In the afternoon, Iris finished her painting. She turned the easel around to show Leon. It depicted the two of them sitting under a tree from behind, the shadows of locust leaves falling on them, sitting very close together. "Me." Iris pointed to the one on the left. "You." She pointed to the right. Leon looked at the painting, his chest swelling with a sour ache. In his past life, he never knew Iris would look at him like this. He thought she felt nothing. She simply and quietly swallowed all the hurt in silence, all alone. "Iris," he began, his voice a little hoarse, "would you like to go out for a walk?" Iris paused for a moment, then nodded. Leon took her to the small park on the outskirts of the city where there were few people. Iris walked along the stone path, clutching the strap of her bag, taking small steps. But she looked around, at the Chinese roses in the flower beds, at the willow branches hanging by the lake, at someone walking a large dog in the distance. Her face was expressionless, but her eyes were bright. She stopped by the bench and suddenly spoke. "The last time I came here was 4 years ago." Leon froze. "Mom brought me here." Iris lowered her eyes. "Later, when there were too many people, I stopped coming." Leon's heart tightened. He unzipped his bag, took out a pair of noise-canceling headphones, and handed them to her. Iris took them and looked at them for a long while. "Put them on when it gets too noisy," Leon said. "I've tried them. You can still hear people talking nearby, but the distant noise is much quieter." Iris put on the headphones, and the world instantly quieted down. The distant sounds of cars, broadcasts, and children shouting all receded a layer. She heard the rustling of the wind through the leaves, and Leon's breathing, right beside her, shallow and steady. She looked up at him, the corners of her mouth curving slightly. They sat in the park that afternoon until the sun began to dip west. Iris wore the headphones for an hour, took them off to rest for a while, then put them back on. On the way back, she walked on Leon's left side. Although still keeping a step's distance, her strides were just a little bit larger than before. On the evening of the 25th day, Leon received a message. The butler said on the phone that Joel had made a dinner appointment with 3 acquaintances from the media that afternoon. On the same day, an anonymous post appeared online. "The price of a tycoon marriage. Why Mr. Gu married a wife he cannot communicate with." Leon finished reading the post and slammed his phone onto the table with a click. The entire text implied that Iris was mentally unfit for marriage, that the Gu family is suspected of using the marriage to acquire the Su family's land, and that Miss Iris may not even know she is getting married. The wording was meticulous, without a shred of evidence. Yet every sentence insinuated in the most vicious direction possible. Iris was in the living room stacking her drawings on the sofa. Seeing Leon's dark expression, she stopped what she was doing. "What's wrong?" Leon turned off his phone screen, walked over and sat down. "Just a small matter at the office. Are you done drawing?" Iris looked at him for a moment and didn't press further. But she pushed the stacked sketches over. The one on top was drawn just today. A man sitting at a desk frowning, with a dark cloud drawn next to him, and raindrops falling beneath the cloud. Leon couldn't help but smile. "Are you drawing me?" Iris pursed her lips and nodded. She thought for a moment, then picked up a yellow crayon from the side and added a sun next to the dark cloud, tiny and showing only half its face. "It'll be better tomorrow," she said. Leon squeezed her hand. "It'll be better tomorrow." But things didn't get better that quickly. By the 3rd day, the rumors began to ferment. Marketing accounts had reposted that post, and the comments were getting uglier. Leon ordered the PR team to urgently delete the post and send a lawyer's letter, but Joel was clearly prepared. The source of the post was on an overseas server, linked to a matrix of 3 different accounts. Delete one and 3 more would pop up. On the 5th day, the Su family saw the post. Grace, Iris's mother, called, her tone hesitant. "Leon, about the things online. Fake. I'm handling it. Keep Iris off the internet," Leon said. After hanging up, he went into the study and rummaged through the documents in the drawer again. Joel's capital chain, shell companies, call logs with Simon. But could these prove he murdered Iris? It wasn't enough. The accidental car crash of the past life was Joel's final move. He must have cleaner methods in hand that he hadn't revealed yet. Leon called his lawyer. "Speed it up. I want Joel's complete financial trail." "Sir, the other side has been very discreet." "Then dig into Simon. He must be funneling benefits to Joel." On the 7th day, Iris still saw it. She just casually opened the browser to look up a paint color code when a pop-up notification jumped out, the red headline glaring. Mr. Leon's wife exposed for seeking medical treatment multiple times before marriage, suspected of severe mental disorder. She stared at the screen for 5 seconds, her fingers starting to feel cold. She recognized the words, but strung together they seemed to be talking about someone she didn't know. Unable to fulfill marital duties? Su family concealed the illness? Mr. Leon may have been forced into the marriage. She closed the page and set down her phone. Then she picked it up again and looked at it one more time. When Leon returned, he found Iris sitting on the sofa with her phone resting on her knees, her shoulders tense as a drawn line. He walked over and noticed she was biting her lower lip, having already left faint teeth marks. "Iris." He called her name, but she didn't react, her gaze fixed on her phone screen. Leon gently took the phone away. The screen was still lit, that post hanging there glaringly bright. They say I'm not normal. Iris's voice was flat, unnervingly flat. They say I deceived you. Leon crouched down, looking her in the eye. He remembered what the book said. When emotions are overloaded, don't ask what's wrong. Don't reason with them. First stabilize the physical environment. He held her hand, pressing his palm against the back of her hand. Iris, look at me. Iris slowly raised her eyes. I don't know a single person who wrote those things online. They haven't seen you, they don't know what you paint every day. They don't know you like sunflowers. They don't know you folded a whole box of paper stars yesterday and put them in my study. They don't know anything. Iris's lips were still trembling. You are my wife, Leon said. I chose you. Every morning when I wake up and see you lying beside me, I feel completely at ease. Do you believe me? Or do you believe those people who don't know you? Iris looked at him, and after a long while, her breathing slowly calmed down. She nodded. I trust you. That night, Iris handed her phone to Leon. The next day, he bought her a new one, preloaded only with drawing apps and offline games, and the browser was locked. Iris paused for a moment when she took it, then said softly, I'm not angry. I know. I'm just a little sad. Leon ruffled her hair. It's okay to be sad. It's also okay not to be sad. Whatever you want is fine. Iris thought for a moment, opened her drawing board, and began to draw. This time she drew a house with large windows, lights shining inside. Two people stood at the doorway holding hands. Joel's second step came faster than Leon had anticipated. On the 10th day, unfamiliar cars appeared in the alley outside the Sioux family garden. For 3 days in a row, at the same time every afternoon, a black sedan parked at the corner. No one got out and the engine wasn't turned off. When the butler reported, he said, I checked the license plate. It's registered under a logistics company. That company has had dealings with one of Joel's shell companies. Leon crushed the pen in his hand. Double the security at home, he said. Iris must not go out without someone accompanying her. But Joel didn't give him much time. On the afternoon of the 12th day, while Leon was in a meeting at the office, the butler called, Sir, Joel's men just climbed over the back wall of the Sioux house. Leon stood up abruptly, knocking his chair over. As he rushed out of the conference room, he heard the sound of glass shattering and the nanny's scream coming from the other end of the phone. He ran 3 red lights on the way. When he arrived at the Sioux residence, the security guards were holding down 2 men in black, while another had escaped. The butler stood at the living room door, his face pale. Madam is upstairs. She locked the door. She's fine? But the living room has been trashed. Leon took the stairs 2 at a time, rushing upstairs. Iris's bedroom door was locked from the inside. He knocked twice. Iris? It's me. The door opened a crack. Iris's face appeared through the gap, her lips pale, but her gaze was steady. She was wearing noise-canceling headphones. Leon pulled her into a tight embrace, his own heart pounding as if it were about to burst. Are you hurt? Iris shook her head. She pointed to her headphones, then pointed downstairs, and made a gesture for noisy. Leon breathed a sigh of relief. He led Iris to the study and locked the door from the inside. Outside the window, sirens wailed. The police had arrived. Iris took off her headphones, looked at him, and suddenly spoke. Is it Joel? Leon froze. How do you know? Every time you take his call? Iris lowered her head, picking at the headphone cord. Your fingers clench tight. You don't like him. I didn't see it before, but I do now. Leon froze for a long moment. Then he smiled faintly. Yes, it's him. He wants to use you to force me to back down. Iris, don't go out these next few days. I'll stay home with you. Iris looked up. But your company. The company isn't as important as you. After speaking, Leon picked up his phone and called his lawyer. Package the evidence and send it out first thing tomorrow morning. At 8 o'clock the next morning, the GU Group's legal department issued a statement, attaching 12 pages of materials, screenshots and recordings of Joel forging commercial documents, illegally transferring assets, and hiring individuals to stalk and harass. The most critical piece was a phone recording in which Joel told an accomplice, "That fool Iris is the easiest to trick. Just make her think she was kicked out by Leon." Leon had obtained that recording long before Joel made his move. He had someone restore the original file, complete with timestamps and voiceprint comparisons. 2 hours after the statement was released, the internet was in an uproar. Joel was calling just as Leon was on the balcony watering flowers with Iris. He glanced at the screen and hung up. Joel called again and he hung up again. He answered on the third call. "Leon, you fucking. Did you ever think about today when you posted those rumors about Iris?" Leon's voice was flat. "Those were all. The recording is real. The transfer records are real. The shell company you had Simon set up is also real." Leon said, "Are you making this call now to beg me to withdraw the evidence, or to threaten me?" There was silence on the other end for a few seconds. Then Joel's voice changed pitch, sharp and vicious. "You think you've won? You'd better watch Iris every day. Don't let her be alone." Leon hung up the phone. He glanced down at his phone screen, then picked up the small watering can on Iris's balcony and continued watering the flowers. Iris squatted beside him, turning a succulent to face the sunlight. "Did he scold you?" Iris asked. "He did. Are you angry?" "A little," Leon said. "But the flowers still need watering." Iris nodded, as if thinking this logic made perfect sense. She reached out and toyed with the succulent's small leaves. "I'll draw him tomorrow." "Why draw him?" "Draw him as a frog." Leon couldn't help but laugh out loud. 3 days later, Joel was taken away by the police for investigation. The charges were escalated from commercial fraud to suspected intentional injury. Leon had also submitted evidence regarding the planning of that car accident. Although it was not yet sufficient to serve as a direct charge, it was enough for the police to conduct a thorough investigation. That afternoon, when the news came, Leon was in his study replying to emails. Iris pushed the door open and came in, placing a cup of hot milk beside his hand. She didn't leave immediately. Instead, she stood beside his chair, twisting the hem of her shirt with her fingers. "What's?" Iris suddenly bent down and gave him a quick hug. It was very light and very fast, like a dragonfly skimming the water. As soon as she let go, she straightened up and took 2 steps back, her face flushing from her neck to the tips of her ears. Leon sat in the chair, frozen in place. It was the first time Iris had taken the initiative to hug him. "Did you make the milk?" he asked. Iris nodded. "Heated it yourself?" He nodded again. Leon lifted the milk and took a large gulp. It was so hot that he kept inhaling sharply, but his eyes curved into a smile. Iris stood 2 steps away watching him. At first she was tense, then the corners of her mouth slowly curled up, and finally her whole face lit up. "It's good," Leon said. "Really good." That night, Iris drew a new page in her sketchbook. 2 people standing face to face with a steaming cup of milk between them. Beside it were written 2 words, "Happy." On the 10th day of Joel's arrest, Leon took Iris to a business dinner. It was the 3rd time he had brought her to a public event. The previous 2 times, Iris had left after only 20 minutes. This time she lasted 45 minutes, wearing noise-canceling headphones the entire time, but she took them off 3 times to say hello to 3 people. After the event ended, they didn't go straight home. Leon drove the car to the riverside and rolled down the windows. The night breeze rushed in, carrying the scent of water vapor. Iris sat in the passenger seat, took off her headphones, and hung them around her neck. "Iris, there is something I want to tell you." Iris turned her head to look at him. Leon gazed at the river ahead, remaining silent for a long time. Images from his past life surged up again. The tombstone, Joel's hideous grin in prison, the oncoming headlights. He gripped the steering wheel tighter. "I had a very long dream. In the dream..." He paused, then corrected himself. "I lived through the days of losing you." Iris listened quietly. "In the dream, I treated you badly. You waited for me at home every day, and I never went back. I found everything you said annoying. When others spoke ill of you, I believed them. Later, when something happened to you, I realized what a jerk I was. Leon's throat felt dry as he spoke this far. He took a deep breath, turned his head to look at Iris. After waking up, I thought that I could never be like that again in this life. So I treat you well because I owe you. And also because He didn't finish his sentence when Iris suddenly reached out and touched the back of his hand. Her fingertips were cool, resting motionless on his hand. Was the me in the dream sad? Iris asked. Leon paused. Were you sad when you woke up? Iris looked at him, her eyes clear. Were you very sad when you came to find me? Leon's Adam's apple bobbed. Yes. Iris turned his hand over, palm up, and placed her own hand inside it. Their fingers slowly interlaced. Then you're not sad anymore, she said. I'm still here now. Leon lowered his head to look at their interlaced hands and suddenly felt his eyes burn. He turned his head, pretending to look at the river, and sniffled. Iris didn't call him out. She just gripped his hand a little tighter. It was quiet in the car for a long time. Later, Iris asked softly, the me in that dream, was she happy in the end? Leon was silent for a while. Later she left, he said. But I think she must have been very afraid before she left. Iris nodded, as if thinking about something. After a moment she said, then you should be a little nicer to her. If you treat her well, she'll know. Leon finally couldn't hold it back, and a single tear fell. He quickly wiped it away with the back of his hand and turned to look at Iris. She was gazing at the river outside the window, her profile soft in the streetlight. Iris, he called her. She turned around. I love you. Iris blinked. Then the corners of her mouth curled up little by little, like a flower slowly blooming. She didn't speak, but she gave his hand a squeeze. Years later, a large patch of sunflowers bloomed in the Gu family garden, golden and brilliant. Iris sat on a small chair in the middle of the flowers sketching, while beside her squatted a 3-year-old girl with a little topknot, clutching a crayon and scribbling circles in a notebook. Mommy, flower. The little girl held up her notebook, on which was a messy yellow blob. Sunflowers. Iris looked down. It's very good. After saying that, she added, better than your daddy's. Leon walked over holding a fruit platter and happened to hear this, finding it both amusing and exasperating. What I painted is called style. Crooked, Iris said. All right, crooked. He sat down on the grass nearby and placed the fruit platter in the middle. The little girl immediately dropped her crayons and pounced on him to grab a strawberry, getting a ring of red juice all around her mouth. Leon took a tissue to wipe her mouth, then turned his head to look at Iris. The sunlight shone on the side of her face as she added the final few strokes to the drawing. The picture depicts 3 people, a father, a mother, and a child, standing hand in hand in front of a sunflower field. Iris finished the last stroke, looked up to meet Leon's gaze, and smiled with her eyes. Are you happy today? Leon asked. Iris thought for a moment. Happy? Why are you happy? Because the sunflowers have bloomed. She pointed at the flower field, then at her daughter, who was yawning while resting on her lap. She told me today that Mommy is pretty. What about me? Iris looked at him seriously. You're pretty too. She paused. But the flowers are prettier. Leon laughed heartily. The laughter startled a few sparrows, which fluttered across the sky above the sunflower field. Iris leaned back in her chair, the sunlight warm, her daughter rolling at her feet, and Leon's laughter right in her ears. She closed her eyes and suddenly remembered what that person had said by the river long ago. Now you have me. She curled her lips into a smile. Yes, now she had them.